Hey guys, do you want to learn a dead easy, simple way to communicate complex, abstract ideas visually to your audience? Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again for yet another episode of the Atomic Ambition podcast, the podcast for self help, self improvement book enthusiasts. Now, this book I really like. The book we're going to talk about today is called Made to Stick. Made to Stick. Now, it was written by, now let me get this correct, written by Chip and Dan Heath. I'm going to imagine they're brothers, but Chip and Dan Heath wrote this book, Made to Stick. The subtitle is Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die. Now, it's a very interesting book about how to communicate. It's a book all about communicating your ideas and your thoughts. And my favorite part about this book is the way it talks about using imagery to convey your message. And one great way to use imagery is using things like metaphors. Describing one thing as being like something else, especially if you have sort of difficult abstract ideas that you want to make people understand. If you use a metaphor, you can perhaps help people to understand what you're trying to say with your message by helping them to picture it with a metaphor. Metaphors. He's a lion. He's a lion in the boardroom. You're using the metaphor of the lion being the powerful sort of king of the jungle sort of creature and assigning those attributes to a person. Yeah, metaphor. Metaphor and simile are what we're talking about here. And a lot of you guys may know that I've spent many years teaching English to students, particularly to people who want to use English in business. Executives, people who need to communicate and collaborate in international projects using English. Perhaps every now and then you have to give a presentation or even a job interview, and you have to demonstrate your English skills. I spent a lot of time helping people sort of use their English to communicate. And one of the things that I've always encouraged people to do is to connect ideas using metaphors, because it's a harder thing to do. I say it's a hard thing in general, but it's even harder if you're trying to do this in a second language. Okay, so if you're a native English speaker, could you imagine trying to use a metaphor in, say, German or Spanish or French or even Chinese? It's going to be a lot harder. Okay, I'm just thinking about it now. My second language would be Italian. I'm trying to think, metaphor in Italian. No, it would be very difficult for me to do. I'd give it a go, but it's difficult. But I think metaphors in general, when we are communicating, do allow us to communicate our ideas clearer. Okay, so I'm gonna definitely say to you guys, buy this book, read this book. But even if you don't want to read the entire book, improve your communication by adopting the use of metaphors. Now, you don't want to communicate solely in metaphor, but if you have something that's a complex, abstract idea, or perhaps you just want someone to visualize something in their mind, metaphors are a good way to do it. Okay, so highly recommend you buy and read Made to Stick, but you don't have to buy the book to understand the power of a metaphor. Okay, now, as well as metaphors, this is not something that's in the book, but one of the things that I've also taught my English language students and other other people to do is how to create connections between to seemingly different things. Now, for example, imagine you're not a very sort of confident person, small talker, and but you want to be, yeah. You might find yourself, let's say for example, you find yourself, going into this sort of kitchen area of your office, you're getting yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and there's one or two other people around, and maybe the small talk is about sport, perhaps, let's say football or soccer. Okay. At the moment, we have the women's Euros happening in Switzerland, so someone could be talking about, the Euros in Switzerland, soccer. But you're not a great soccer fan. Maybe you don't like soccer. Maybe you don't. Football is not your thing. Perhaps tennis is your thing. Um, if you're a tennis fan, you'll know that Wimbledon is also happening at the same time as the Euros. Now they are different things, but they have lots of similarities. There are lots of commonalities between the two things. So this is an easy example, but it's very easy to connect two different sports because they are sports. But you can connect almost anything. All you have to do really is look for a similarity, a commonality between the two things, and you can quite easily change the course of a conversation from being about something that you don't enjoy talking about or don't know how to talk about to something that you do know how to talk about. Okay. Now, for example, I'm thinking sort of soccer, football, and tennis. Both sports, both competitive sports, both popular sports on television, both have referees. And a referee is a really, really important person in a competitive sport. The referee has to decide, is that fair? Is that okay? Or not? So I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I'm riffing off the top of my head. Referees. Referees in football, they tend to get slated. They get a lot of anger from the audience, from the people watching, because the referee has to make perhaps sometimes a contentious decision about, was that a foul? Is that a free kick? Now, obviously, if the referee in a football match awards the free kick or the foul to that team, those supporters go, yay, but the opposition go boo and they don't like it. So the referee in a soccer match is a really contentious person. Yeah. Whereas the referee in a tennis match tends to not have that kind of problem with the audience, not necessarily with the tennis players. John McEnroe, famous tennis player, who was always arguing with the umpire in tennis. But the spectators don't tend to sort of boo or deride the umpire. So there's a similarity, but there's a difference, and that's an interesting difference between soccer and tennis. And it's a connection. You can change the course of the conversation by joining in the conversation about soccer or football, simply stating in the small talk that you find that the referees in football tend to get a lot of anger from the fans. Whereas I've been watching Wimbledon tennis and I love tennis. The referee, although there's sometimes problems with the competitors, the fans actually tend to support the referee's decisions no matter who they're supporting. Okay, so you've kind of created a connection. There's something similar but also something different. And you've changed the course of the conversation from being about football, something you don't want to talk about, to tennis, something you do want to talk about. Okay, so using those similarities and creating connections between seemingly different things is a great technique to practice, and it's a great small talk tool to have. So if you can hear somebody having a conversation or talking about something, or perhaps they ask you a question about something. Hi, did you watch the match at the weekend? Yeah, if you have the ability to think about, Okay, what's the connection between that thing that they've asked me about or they're talking about and this thing that I would prefer to talk about? Create a connection. Yeah. Use your connection to change the conversation. It's a great tool to have. Honestly, um, what a lot of my business English students have to do sort of English speaking exams. Say if you want to demonstrate to perhaps a future employee that you have high level English, but maybe you're Spanish or you're French, so you take an exam. Now, in the exam, you've got no idea what you might be talking about. They might ask you to talk about managing a meeting, um, doing shopping. It might be sport. It might be anything. Usually, people don't have all the vocabulary or all the confidence to talk about all of these different things. So one of the skills I have always emphasized is creating this connection. They're asking you about this. You don't know how to talk about this subject, but you do know how to talk about this subject. There is a connection. However tenuous that connection is, you can find a connection between this thing and this thing, and you can change the conversation. And that's perfectly okay to do. Yeah. Anyway, I have waffled enough, I think, for now. Made to Stick. It's a great book. It's a great book about how to communicate in pictures, creating pictures in the minds of the people you're communicating with. Metaphors are a great way to do that. So if you don't use metaphors, I highly recommend that you should do. Other great sort of tools, metaphor and simile, okay, idiomatic expressions, idioms. You will know lots of idioms. Break a leg, things like that. Yeah, idioms are another great way to communicate. In visuals, yeah, we all know the idioms, and we should use them more often as well. Anyway, that's enough from me for this week. Enjoy the book, and see you all again soon.